Change fatigue is real and likely being experienced by many in your team or organization, and maybe even yourself. So how can you best overcome change fatigue to reinvigorate and reengage yourself and those around you? Well, welcome to part one of this two-part series focused on providing you with action-oriented tips to help you overcome change fatigue in yourself as well as in your team. This is such an incredibly important and timely topic that I actually created a two-part series. So welcome to part one of this series focused on helping you overcome change fatigue, where I'm going to be sharing 6 easily applicable and digestible tips to help you do just that. All right, let's get into it. In part one, you're going to first develop a better understanding of the dynamics at play that create and sustain change fatigue. Then I'm going to guide you through 2 major ways you can help those in your organization overcome change fatigue, with helpful, action-oriented tips along the way. And given the rapid pace at which our world is changing, this is perhaps the most meaningful and important video I've created yet. Let's begin by furthering our understanding of the cost on the individual as it relates to bringing change to life. Leading and executing change in the workplace is an imperative today, and I know that you can agree with that as you're probably experiencing a lot of change in your work. And there are certainly costs associated to the business when bringing change to life, whether that be additional resources, whether that be new technology, new tools, new systems integration, maybe even contractor support. But there's also a cost that the individual responsible for bringing that change to life is incurring. And that cost looks like the time spent, the mental energy, the physical energy, the emotional drain associated with dealing with the tasks, executing those tasks, as well as working through setbacks, mistakes, and failures. This is a significant cost that every individual who's enrolled in bringing that change to life is going to have to spend. As these costs climb, as more change gets introduced, as changes become increasingly more complex, the greater the risk of change fatigue. And you can overcome this change fatigue in 2 major ways. The first, to reduce those costs, and the second, to offset those costs. Now, I'm going to dive into both of those, but before we do, if you're getting value from this, make sure you subscribe or even click the notification bell. I do videos like this all the time, dropping value directly to you. So make sure you're subscribed so you can get the latest video as soon as it drops. All right, let's get into these. So let's start with cost reduction, which means reducing the amount of cost, that energy, that time, that effort that's required of every individual. And you can do that by balancing the demand to move the business forward, both internal and external, with the balance of individual employee health and well-being. So let me actually share 2 action-oriented tips to help you do just that. The first tip is to think about strategically streamlining the number of big, complex change initiatives that are happening in the business, and maybe even those smaller initiatives. And give it thought, right? What are the big 3 major change priorities that you want your organization to execute with excellence? The top 3. Ask yourself, would you rather those top 3 get executed with excellence, or perhaps 9 or 10 get executed with mediocrity and a higher rate of failure? As best as you can, streamline your change priorities in those initiatives. Minimize the amount of effort that it's going to be required of the organization and the individuals comprised of it to bring it to reality. Minimize those priorities so that the individuals have the energy, the motivation, and the fuel to get through all of them with excellence. The second tip on this one in reducing the cost that's going to be incurred by every individual is to streamline or minimize the waves of change that impacts the workforce. I'm sure you've either led or been involved in an organization that got through one change initiative, and just as you thought you had your arms around it and things were about to be completed successfully, another change hits. Here's there's another business priority, another transformation that you have to lead, and they just seem to happen one after the other, one after the next. So as best you can, strategically orient these waves of change to be a little bit more separated. And another way of minimizing the impact of these waves of change is to segment out the organization, right, based on readiness and capability. Perhaps there's an organization that hasn't experienced nearly as much change that might be ready to actually deliver a change initiative. So put the priority on them to move it forward and then move on to those other organizations. I think the best way to do this is by being in tune with organizational readiness and capability. If you're dealing with a team or an org that's already been through many, many waves of change, that level of change fatigue is probably going to be high, or at least the risk of that. So think about what truly is the most imperative thing that needs to happen right now in the business. And can we wait to give the organization a bit of breathing room before we embark upon the next change initiative? The next means of overcoming change fatigue is to offset those costs that the individual might incur. And by that I mean getting very explicit and understanding and communicating the gains that the individual will be afforded by expending the energy, the time, and the effort in making that change a reality. And so in practice, that might look like, once this change has been completed, this is what you're going to be able to enjoy. Streamline work, a more efficient way of working, more connected to your clients, more connected to your customers, maybe more connected to your team. And so let them know this is what you're going to gain by expending that cost. To put very simply, this is about making the change worthwhile, right? I know that I'm going to have to expend so much time, so much mental energy, so much emotional stress to make this change a reality. But by doing so, I'm going to gain so much. I'm going to learn something through the journey, and my work is going to be less complex and more streamlined once I get through it. And so that's going to help employees lean into the change, knowing that the cost that's incurred, what they have to spend to make the change happen, is going to be offset by everything that they'll gain, that they'll enjoy because of the change journey and because of what will happen once the change has been implemented successfully. That was part one. Hopefully you're digging it and you remain curious, because we got a second part. So follow me right now to part two of this two-part series.